Hi, welcome to Inge's Knitting Lab and this knitting tutorial series on how to make the tree trunk cardigan, the one with the form and fit shoulder design. In this episode I will show you how to make the Afterthought buttonholes, and we call them Afterthought because we apply them once we have finalized the knitting and once the cardigan has been washed and blocked. And the benefit hereof is that we can have the placement of the buttons exactly where we want. We can have the number of buttons, the size of buttons that we like. So that's nice. Yeah, well, we cannot talk about buttonholes without talking about buttons, can we? Because we have to decide on which side of the cardigan to place them. And actually, this goes back in history, because it seems that there is a side for women and a side for men. So before we start doing the buttonholes, let's take a small trip back in history and learn more of the funny stories of the placement of buttons. Let's have a look at the illustration here of the tree trunk cardigan, where I have tried to map down the placement of button and buttonholes as a holdover from the 18th century back in history. So the story goes that the wealthy women, they had maids, servants to help them dress, and as most people typically are right-handed, it made sense that the buttons would be here on the left side of the cardigan, close to the heart. That's how I remembered women, close to heart here. So they placed the buttons here so that when the maid should help button and unbutton jackets or corsets or what you call it, it was easy standing in front of the woman here and doing this. And it was said that the men, they dressed themselves, so actually it was easier for them if the buttons were placed on the other side, so that with a hand like this, being right-handed, it was easier to button and unbutton the vest or the jacket. And this also correlates with another story about men that when going to war, and in those days we had wars with swords, and they drew the sword from here and it would not be caught in this jacket opening here going this way, and their armors actually also overlapped from left to right. So these stories could actually make practical sense, right? Whereas the last story, I don't know if it's true, or it's not based on a practical feature here. It goes back also to the 18th century, and it's about Napoleon Bonaparte, a French general playing a big role in the French Revolution, and he became Emperor of France. He often posed with his hand like this in his vest, with the buttonholes here and the buttons on this side, and I've added in a photo of him here for you to see. And the story goes that women ridiculed him, the big warrior, with this posture. And from then on after, he ordered the buttons moved to the other side for all women. So I don't know if it's true, but at least you can also read in the storybooks that he was bullied also due to his Corsican accent. He originated from Corsica, so maybe he was a bit sensitive to bullying and may have made this kind of irrational decision. But nowadays, who cares where the buttons are, just as long as there are buttons, right? However, I will honor the old stories here, and I will place the buttons close to heart when I make female cardigans, and male cardigans will be over here at the right hand side here. In the sweater or the cardigan for myself, I have placed the buttons over here close to heart, women close to heart, and on the male one I have made already I placed the buttons here on the right hand side of the cardigan. But enough about the stories. Now let's move back to the cardigan and get this buttonhole done. Now it's time to try on the cardigan to see where you want the buttons to be, or the recipient of the cardigan, and how many buttons you want. So first of all, the button here in the center of the bottom hem, this is fixed. This will always be here. So the question is, how wide or narrow do you want your V-neck? So within this design, you can actually have quite a range here. It is kind of designed so that you would typically put the button here where you ended the V-neck in creases. My husband tried on the cardigan and he would like the button to be here, just a bit above. So that's why I put this stitch marker here. So now the next decision point was to see how many buttons he would like, and we tried to have 4 looking like this, but he thought this would be too much of a distance, so he actually decided on 5 buttons of these copper-like colored buttons, which would go just in line with this frame here. So that was a decision. So now it comes in very handy that we were very meticulous in making the left and the right side very symmetrical when picking up the stitches, so that now we can count in purl ridges to decide where to put the buttons and the buttonholes. So what we do now is that we take our measurement from the center of the placement of the upper button and the center of the placement of the lower button. So this is around 41 centimeters, a bit more than 16 inches. And now I have to calculate the distance between the buttons. So in order for me to get the distance, I take the number of buttons minus 1, namely 1, 2, 3, 4 distances. So I divide 41 by 4, which gives me around 10 centimeters, a bit more than 4 inches between the buttons. So I start from below here. I have located the center ridge here, and I count these 4 inches or 10 centimeters. This is around this purl ridge, so I have 1, 2, 3, 10 ridges between the buttons. So I count 10, 10, 10, and this gives me the last button here. So I consulted my husband. He said, okay, it could be around here, that's fine. So that's why you can adjust kind of the placement by doing this. If we would have a longer distance between the buttons here, then it would have crawled up a bit here, and shorter it would be further down here. So that's how you kind of adjust the buttons. So now we are set to go, and I have placed all the stitch markers here and also on the other button bands, so that I can now make the buttonholes. And actually, as you can see, I have cheated a bit, so I will wind back the video so you can see how I make these Afterthought buttonholes here in the purl ridges using nothing but my yarn and a darning needle. So let's get to it. I have cut my yarn. It's approximately the same length as the button band here from the bottom to the V-neck, and I will now part it in 2, so that 2 ply times 2 here. And you may wonder why I do this, and this is because I want to minimize the bulk in the buttonhole, so that 1, I can hide it as much as possible, and 2, it doesn't take up room for the button, so that we have enough space, because I'm using, I guess, the kind of the biggest button you can when doing these kind of Afterthought buttonholes. If they are much bigger than 2.5 centimeter, 1 inch, then I think it's better to do the buttonholes while knitting. But as we have maybe a hard time deciding where we want the buttons and where they will be located once we have blocked the sweater, it is so practical with these Afterthought buttonholes. Okay. Well, now the cardigan has changed color, and let me explain why. It's because when I make these tutorial videos, I do it before the testing starts so that the testers can see what I mean with the different details in my design. And while doing a lot of these cardigans plus 10 now, I improve somehow the functionality sometimes, but also to the efficiency of doing it. So this is why I have cut out the old part here to show you how I do the Afterthought buttonholes now and sewing on of the buttons, because I have figured out a few more tips and tricks on doing this. So let's get right to it. Let me start with the Afterthought buttonhole, which in this case is a horizontal one. And let me tell you what I changed. Because usually I would place the center of the buttonhole in the center of the button band. Yes, admit it, I'm still a sucker for symmetry, so that's how I would do it. But when we started wearing these cardigans, I've made plus 10 already, then we saw when wearing there may happen a bit of tension here when you have worn it a lot, and when you do this, the button tends to travel towards the edge here, and then it doesn't look very symmetrical, does it? So I thought, well, I have to change this, and the way of doing it is to shift the center of the buttonhole to be slightly shifted here towards the body of the cardigan. So that's what I'm doing. In order to locate the new center of the buttonhole, I count the number of rows I did. So I know from the pattern that in second setup row I did 1 row of 1 by 1 ribbing, and then I did 8 rows afterwards. So I should have in total 9 of these ridges. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the last one hidden up here, 9. So 9 divided by 2 is 4.5. So it fits perfectly that I have 4 ridges towards the body and 5 ridges towards the edge of the button band. So let's count. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my center would be here. So I start making this center wider, first with the needle, then with my hand. I just wiggle a bit in this direction to make room for the button, and then I try on the button in here. Yes, well, it works fine. And this button is 18 millimeters, so of course you need, when you now do the winding to create the hole, to count in the number of ridges you need for the width of your button. Okay, but now I have made room, so I go to the other side here, and I use this pearl ridge here to fasten my yarn, and 3 is the magic number when doing these Afterthought buttonholes, at least for this button size. So now it's fastened, and I now travel here in this leg towards the center. I do this so that you won't see. So like always, I match functionality with would you call it finishing look or aesthetics. Now I go to the other side here in the center of the hole. Now that I've traveled my way here along the stitch to the center of the hole, I will start doing the Afterthought buttonhole. So I do the winding, and as we recall, I will do 3 for this button size, being a size, where was it? Here, 18 millimeter, I do 3. Of course, if you have another size button, you will need, you have a wider button band for sure, and then you need perhaps 4 of these. So now I will just place my needle underneath 3 of those and make the first winding here on the back side, like this. Not very tight, the first one. And then I start tightening like this. 1, that was 2 actually, with the loose one. 3. So now I've done the tightening here towards the body. So now it's time to travel here along the buttonhole, and again I look at the flow of the stitches going like this. So I do this. This also helps tightening the button, or kind of making it more robust here along the hole. So I have now traveled to the other side, so I poke my needle inside the hole, and now I will turn the work and do the winding on the other side. So I need 3 here again. So 1 loose, and then the second I tighten very much, and the third I tighten very much. And now I use my button again to make sure that I have enough room. Well, it's a bit tight, but it goes fine now. Otherwise I wiggle a bit before I do the tightening with the yarn here. So now I just poke my needle through again, and as I travel this way up here going to this side, I will just travel on the other side going back, enforcing the hole here and have it look nice like this. And you recall I traveled my way up here, so it doesn't matter, I can travel back here like this. And then I just cut my yarn, and there you go, the buttonhole a bit skewed or shifted towards the body. And this is how it looks like. Don't worry that you will break the yarn. I have made many now, and I have never ever broken the yarn or made any damage other than the intended hole here, so that's fine. I think I need the last one, or I did 3 already, I don't recall. I have the same issue here now with slide hole, so I just make a new tweener strand by doing this to close the gap, and place my needle back here on the back side, and I can look at the buttonhole from both sides, and I think it is quite nice. Let's have a closer look at the result. So, as I guess I said earlier, this knit stitch here around the buttonhole is kind of distorted in order to make room for the button here. However, of course, when it is closed, you will not see it behind the button, and otherwise I think it's an okay result. If you think that it doesn't look nice enough front and back, you can always kind of embroider and make it look nicer. Just recall that for every time you add more yarn here, you will make less room for the button, so it gets tighter to get the button through. Of course, while wearing this, you will kind of adjust the buttonhole. It will get used to being unbuttoned and buttoned. But anyway, actually I also tried to crochet around here, even using only 1 ply. It got too much volume here, so I have decided to leave it be like this. So just one more thing, maybe if you saw my other episode on how to do the button band knitting, we looked at the end here and saw that it was slightly up here, there was a small gap, and I promised you that once we made the buttonholes, it would get fully aligned. Also here on the other side, it will get aligned when we add the button. So I think I have made my promise come true here. It looks quite fine. So I guess up next in the next episode is to add the buttons. So I will add these copper-like buttons for the copper color here, and I have decided to use the copper yarn and not the orange yarn. Of course, this could also be an effect, but let's talk about this in the next upcoming episode. So until then, happy knitting and good luck with your Afterthought buttonholes. Bye bye. Bye bye from Inge's Knitting Lab.